So our first presentation from today is to talk about notifications, specifically on a recent project we've been doing for NOAA. So I'm actually going to hand it off here to Ian Holtson. He's one of our supervisors over in the service desk, specifically the one focusing on our research federal team. So Ian, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Corey.
Share in here. There you go.
So as Corey mentioned, my name's Ian. I'm the supervisor of the research team, and NWave is one of the networks under our support catalog. So just jumping right in, notifications today are via operations list or targeted via circuit IDs. These methods are not as specific or targeted as we want them to be. So NWave's notification project will transition notifications into a subscription-based project, or process rather. Customers will have access to a notification portal and subscribe to notifications they wish to receive. Notification selections will be based on location for NWave FSMA ID and also service type. Just as a quick example, if customer A wants to only receive wireless notifications in College Park, Maryland, then they'll be able to do so. And before doing a quick demo here and taking a look at the GlobalNOC tools used to support this project, I wanted to mention some current challenges from a service desk perspective and why we think this project will be such a benefit, not only to us, but to our customer base as well. So today, alarm and outage triage is a manual process. A service desk technician views the alarms and begins to investigate what is down based on the links to our database within each alarm. We must also make a determination of which services are being impacted. For large-scale events, this manual analysis of every impacted asset can tend to be time-consuming and can also cause delays in our initial notifications being sent. Moving forward, NWave services will be represented by service IDs. Our notification tool will be able to notify customers based on which service IDs are being impacted. After the alarms are acknowledged to a ticket, these service IDs are going to be automatically generated in the affected section of the ticket. So this will in turn trigger population of notification templates based on which service is being impacted. Each service has specific alarm criteria that triggers service ID population in the ticket. So after a little bit of review there, I'll steal a screen share here and I'll just do a quick tools demo to kind of review what I just spoke about.
And Ian, if you wouldn't mind me interrupting for a second, I guess for our other guests that are not familiar with like a FSMA ID, I guess a good analogy for their purposes would be like, I don't know, an administrative division or a separate subset of offices or something like that. So I guess that's the best way to think of a FSMA ID as some kind of division or administrative domain or something.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, so for NWave, they use FSMA IDs. They're just internal identifiers that we're going to use to make sure folks get the right notifications. This first tool here is our notification portal. This is going to be customer facing. So customers will have the ability to come in here and set their notification rules. The first column here is location. So it corresponds to all of the POPs or the points of presence in our database. The second row here is the FSMA ID that we just talked about. And then the last row here is the specific service that someone might want to subscribe to. So you see here we have half a dozen services right now on NWave. This next view here, so this is an example of what an outage might look like to a service desk technician. If I kind of unnest some of these, we see there's quite a few alarms to triage and look through. A lot of these are going to have links to the database where we can go and we can get a sense of what device is alarming, who's being impacted, things like that. And the reason that we'd want to do that is so we can manually pull the circuit IDs into the affected section of the ticket, right? Because that's what's going to trigger our targeted notifications. As I mentioned, one of the biggest changes that I'm most excited about at the service desk is the ability for our tooling to manually input these service IDs based on what's being acknowledged to the ticket. So our next view here is a ticket that I've pre-created, and I've acknowledged all of the alarms on the previous screen to this ticket. As a result of that, here in the affected section, we see a couple service IDs have been generated. So I as the technician didn't have to do any work except for acknowledge those alarms to this ticket for those service IDs to be generated. In the past, our previous course of action would be to manually go into the database and enter these IDs into the ticket. So also, in addition to the automatic population of the service IDs, we see these notification templates. And the notification templates right here are corresponding to the service IDs that are being impacted. So we have 3 NWave services here: TICAP, Cloud, and PRI, which stands for Public Routing Instance. Each of these templated texts, we have the ability to manipulate. If our customer base comes back and says, we really want the initial TICAP template notification to read like this instead of that, we have the ability to quickly change that and make that change for all TICAP incidents. We also have our traditional notification text here. So this will look familiar to a lot of folks that receive GlobalNOC notifications. We will still have this field that the service desk will be able to manually update. So, say we've got a hardware issue and we're getting into specifics as the outage goes on, we'll be able to update this field and ensure our customer base receives those specific updates. And lastly here, the product of the work here, as we mentioned, is the actual customer-facing notification. So this is a look at our notification tool. We see here, I'm seeing the templates for all 3 of these services that I highlighted. And I'll scroll down, and this is me. So on the back end, we've used me as a test example, and I'm subscribed to 3 services. So I'm showing 3 templated services text. Now, if I only wanted to receive TICAP notifications, then I would not have cloud or private routing instance notifications here. I would just see this TICAP blurb. So again, all of this is in an effort to get the customer a more targeted, a more meaningful message for what they want to see. Our affected services are identified here. So if just this string doesn't mean much to you right away, then you can see here a little description: private routing instance for customer USPTO at the location, and also the FSMA ID. So that wraps up my demo here. I'll open it up for any questions.
I have a quick question. Can you bring that screen back up for a second?
Yeah, sure. Which one, Chris?
This one here. So the templates that you're talking about look like they just affect the field in the update where it says TICAP services impacted, cloud services current. Is that what the template is?
Those are the current templates. Yeah, they're pretty rudimentary, but like I said, we can pivot and change those and make those robust as we need to.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think having bespoke service specific notifications is a good thing, but I had always envisioned that as a completely separate message rather than stuffing it into an email that just says various services on the top in the subject line. The feedback that we have gotten from Internet 2 customers is that when we say various services and then there's just kind of this big giant list of things to scan through, they don't do it. So this is great and good progress. I would definitely advocate for thinking about breaking these out into 3 separate messages that are more specific to that particular service and targeted to that particular service.
Yeah, That's a fair point. We've also experimented with things like we can make database calls. So in these templated messages, for instance, we could pull fields from the database that we thought might be relevant to that specific outage. We have come into some hurdles for that. So say we have an outage that's impacting a dozen customers, the same service for that. So that notification would be, there'd be a lot of text crammed in. We wanted to keep it simple at first. But yeah, I'll note your feedback certainly.
But it's really good progress. I think that having the ability to craft messaging that is specific to a particular service in language that can be understood by those communities is extremely important. I think the other half of it is going to be getting them out to the right people. And I'm thinking in particular the challenges we have with Cloud Connect on Internet 2, in that we have notifications that go out to people that don't traditionally interact with the Internet 2 NOC, they're campus level people, they're Cloud Connect architects at those universities. And when we send them notifications with our service circuit IDs, they kind of shrug their shoulders. And they're like a great example of a community that doesn't really understand the big giant ecosystem of our outage notifications, and would really benefit from having something that says, like, your AWS connection will be going down, and this is the impact that's expected in a more targeted way. So just good progress on this. A lot of good groundwork, and it'd be great to build on it.
So I think that part of that is answered here. So in the affected services section, that the descriptions of those services are teased out a little bit more. This is where we might be able to add like AWS identifiers, things like that. Thanks, Chris. Does anybody else have any more questions?
There's a question in chat from Scott at Aron, which is, how do your customers know what POPs and services to select to receive notifications?
Thanks, David. I'll keep an eye on the chat here. So yeah, there will be a learning curve, just getting our customers involved with this process, getting them subscribed. We haven't made it quite that far in our conversations in terms of the rollout, right? I mean, how do we best broadcast this to our customer base to make sure everybody's on board during the transition day? Do we do that in a change window? So we do still have some of these pending questions.
And also, Ian, we may be kind of unique compared with NOAA NWAVE compared to other customers, in that for each customer that's connecting, there's a connection agreement document that states a lot about their connection, and all of that has to happen first. Maybe you have something similar, but it specifies like a diagram with their POP and their service and those kinds of things. And so that's part of turning up a connection with them. So that's one way they know how to, what POPs and services they might want notifications on. Now, on the other hand, they may want, because maybe they have some IT responsibilities at smaller sites or something like that, and they want notifications from sites where they aren't personally located or so on. And that is a little less clear, and people may change what they want to receive over time. If they're using a resource at another site that really matters to their researchers or whatever, they might want to receive notifications for somewhere that's not directly one of their sites. And, in a way, we'll have to see how that plays out as we go.
And one of the differences between the NWAVE network and a lot of the backbone networks we support is that there's a lot of end user facing services here. And so a lot of these people will be subscribing to services, in the buildings they're responsible for. So the managed LAN service that NWAVE provides to their building, or the wireless service. And so those users are going to be able to select the buildings pretty easily. It's sort of the core transport services that connect back to NWAVE's core POPs that I think that, like Karen said, there are things like interconnection agreements and things like that that they should know, but we're going to be doing a lot of hand holding in the beginning to get this bootstrapped.
Yeah, at the service desk level, we're definitely expecting those interactions with customers who are needing a hand choosing their criteria on that tool.
So I just had a comment. I think the hardest part in this is that services impacted, what does that really mean? And unfortunately, I think there's not a good way to automate some of that. So it requires an engineer or somebody to look at, does this mean my service is out? Does it mean I have reduced resiliency? Does it mean I have reduced capacity? So, what does my service impacted really mean?
Yeah, and that's fairly hard problem to solve for change, to anticipate all the impact when we're doing a planned maintenance. We tried to solve this for outages, by really focusing on the alarms that would indicate that the service is actually out. And when we do the automatic association between the alarms and the services that Ian showed, we only consider alarms that would indicate a service outage, not a service diminishment. So that is a potential future enhancement to look at, not only alarms that indicate an outage, but also the alarms that indicate some sort of diminished redundancy, and also being able to notify on that.
Looks like Daniel's got a question, Daniel Hurley. Can a service be tied to a group of monitors? Daniel, I'm not sure. I guess, are you thinking like a group of monitoring services, or are you thinking something else?
Yeah, a group of monitoring services, like does a service tied to just like, one particular interface, a group of things? Can you group them? Can you create dependencies, and things like that?
Yeah, so there is.
So there's like a lot of dependencies, obviously, in the network. If X thing goes down, Y also goes down, and if you can kind of group them and make dependencies, that'd be super useful.
Yeah, so no, you can't do any dependencies right now in the way this is set up. We're sort of looking at single alarms that indicate service outage. So like for a PRI, we're looking for BGP session state. For the wireless, for the managed LAN, we're looking at can we reach a switch, for instance.
I mean, one of the things that we've actually talked about in the past is, a more generalized way to build those kinds of dependencies into services. And that's something, we still very much have our eye on that. Like the work that we've been doing recently has been focused on, some specific use cases for NWave, rather than trying to sort of, boil the ocean with a completely generalizable solution. But, a lot of the progress that we've made here has been on, we have these like specific service types, but then the other side of it, the bigger picture is like just moving towards this model where we have these high level abstractions, rather than, things like interfaces. So once we have this framework where we can tie notifications to this high level abstraction layer, then that's setting the groundwork for us to then basically expand the kinds of services that we can build, including, the kinds of dependencies that you're talking about.
So I know we've got a couple of people from NWave on the line here. Have you guys heard from people that are a part of this service? Have they seen a big benefit? Are they able to better recognize what the actual impact is?
I don't deal that much with the customer side, but I think that prior notifications that just had a list of circuit IDs was very hard to interpret. So I think this is a vast improvement over that.
This is something.
Go ahead, Luke.
I was just going to say, this is something that is at the point we're about to put it into production for NWave. We think we've got fairly close to a final solution here. There's a bunch of data work that we're doing now to sort of get all the service data populated. But we wanted to present this to you all today that are not part of the NWave network, just to get some ideas about this project that NWave initiated with us, to think about how you might be able to use similar things for your notifications in the future. It is designed to be in a system that's extensible, and so we do expect to be able to apply it to other networks. So, just something to start thinking about as you think about, enhancing your notifications. We do have this new capability now.
Are there any other questions or any other thoughts that you guys have on this? What are some things that you might look to see if you were to be able to do this on your network?
Well, I've already talked a little bit about my interest. I think that there has been a significant amount of interest in getting notifications more useful in general on internet too, and it's one of those things that I've postponed until right after we're done with the NGI rollout. But I've been talking with folks like Bill Owens and a few others in the community that have been very vocal about making some changes. Service awareness is one of the big things. So we're highly interested in starting to dip our toes into the notifications. Fortunately, our backend systems, we've created a lot of the services. So we've done the data population for it. Now that the tooling is there, we'll be ready to take that next step, I think, pretty quickly, and are highly motivated to make it better.
This is, we'll be talking a little bit in the portal session later today about some new things we're doing with portals this year. This is one example of a way that we're able to write data back using our portals. And one of the things that's really great about the NWave user set is they all have a way that we can federate with our authentication systems. And so one of the things that Ian didn't show, he was already logged in, but if you're an NWave user in one of the Department of Commerce departments, whether it's NOAA or one of the other departments that use NWave, they can log into this tool with their native auth, and we use Shibboleth for all that on the back end.
I wanted to mention, I know some of our NOAA partner folks are having trouble getting connected. So if we have questions that we can't answer here, we can always revisit some later.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions here, we can maybe end this one a few minutes early. I know we've got a few people queued up for the next presentation, so I don't know if we want to start that too early. But one of the things, I guess we can have, I guess an option here, we can either all come back at 12:55, it's about 25 minutes, and we can leave this bridge open for any questions if anything comes up, or we can try to maybe start things a little bit early. Is there a general feeling as to what might be better? I'm still trying to figure out how to get those few extra people in here and why they're having issues.
If the presenters are ready, I'd say let's go ahead and move through. That's my opinion, but others can contradict that.
Corey, are some of the people that are presenting the next session the ones that are trying to get into stuff?
They are not, but I don't know if they are on. I'm checking right now.
Yeah, that's my only concern. That we've got a few specific people who've expressed an interest in participating in this session. So if they're not here yet, we should probably wait.
It looks like.
So while you work on that, Corey, why don't we kind of open up the floor to talk about notifications? Because I know that when I was doing the pilot program for Ocean as their CRM, there was a big interest in having notifications that were tailored really to services. And it would be nice to know, I think we've got folks from, not that I've been trolling the audience, but I know we've got folks from Lonnie as well as CEN and Ocean. So it would be nice to hear from them as far as what your interest, what you're hearing from your members as far as notifications. And if there are, we sort of have spare time on our hands to talk about what we're capable of doing based on your needs. So it's rare for us to all be on one platform and to be able to discuss this openly without a time restraint. So I encourage those that have needs regarding notifications to speak up.
Okay, so you called us out, so I'll chime in first.
Thanks, Lance. I didn't want to have to name names, so I appreciate you finding the unmute button.
Trust me, I find myself in the same position that you're in at the moment, oftentimes. So I will say, being one of the newest customers of GlobalNOC, we're still learning a lot in terms of our transition from expectations of one NOC to another. We are still working on building a lot of our data. So that we know that that's a key component of being able to effectively communicate. So one of the things that we recognize at this moment until we get there, we still have to be owners of that communication and ensure that something is being communicated, either from the NOC directly from us, but we still have to manage that process. And we actually had an internal meeting about that last week to kind of set the proper expectations amongst ourselves because we've not fully equipped the NOC to be able to do that yet.
So
and it's a timing thing.
And that's a huge time suck as far as getting your data from one format into the database so you can actually fully utilize all the tools.
Well, and then balancing that with the fact that we are also undertaking a network refresh. So there's another 200 something devices that, do we want to spend the time and effort to do that and then replace it in 6 months? Or do we want to do that when we actually build the new network? So that's a time suck as well.
It is, but being able to manage that data as it comes in, if that's something that the GlobalNOC could help with, I know that in the case of Ocean, they actually contracted for additional resources to help with their database integrity. So that's certainly something that we can help. So if others find themselves in that place, there is that opportunity as well.
Great questions. At this point, I'm gonna still defer to the cliche of I don't know what I don't know, and so we are trying to ask those questions along the way so we can be a little more efficient and timely.
Yeah, sure. There's a matter of administrative capacity to that question, but there's also a matter of ownership to that question, and so administratively, it'd be interesting to understand what Ocean was able to take and incorporate, but at the same time, the ownership of the data being valid and the scope of what you're asking someone to enter in. It's kind of like back to Rob's point about the notification and, well, then is there going to be someone that's going to be knowledgeable to understand what the data is and the notification being created and being targeted and so forth. So if you can kind of share what was that engagement like? And I think you're onto something here. I think we haven't been together, and the dynamic conversations that can exist in this kind of forum lends itself to that reincorporation of the user group, so that body that we can have this kind of platform for dialogue.
Yeah. So I think there's two different pieces. You're right. There are pieces that we are well equipped to help with, and some that we aren't, because we're not experts on every piece of your network that we need to know to be able to get the documentation in. And so the service we provide is really like providing structure around the process. providing some project management, and then providing some hands to actually do the data entry once the data is all sort of gotten together, massaging it so that it gets in the database in the right way. And I think Corey is going to be talking about the users group later today.
Yeah, one of the lightning talks we'll have is just to talk about what we're going to be doing with the user group and where we go from here. So hang around for that, and we can talk about that. I know, Lonnie, you guys have expressed interest in that, and some of the things we're planning on doing will allow us to continue to have some of these conversations long term. Also, it looks like everyone was able to join. Adam, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits the new notifications are maybe going to have for NOAA.
Sure, I can do that. Thanks. Sorry, everyone, that it's having some technical difficulties there. It's pretty interesting with the notification. So we've typically had like a WAN service, and everything worked well with the notifications and how the circuits are done there, and entities are tied to that. And then we set up new services, wireless being one, managed lane being one, VPN, and what we have now is a lot of multiple services running over the same equipment, same links. And where before with the WAN connections, the WAN connection went to a single customer. And so it was easy to identify that circuit belongs to that customer. Notifications work that way. And the other part that with that is either the WAN's up or it's down type thing, right? You can have intermittent and things like that, but typically when we're notifying, it's an issue with that. But you can have in the campus environment an issue with, let's say, the wireless, and nothing else is impacted on that switch, right? Because there's maybe something to do with the consolidated architecture. So how do we notify in those cases? We were struggling with that. So in working with the GlobalNOC, came up with this service-based notification, and that actually kind of opened the door for us in a lot of different ways. For one, shifting to a self-registration model, which one of the items that we deal with, and when I first joined, I kind of heard a comment about it that I think resonated with me, is that it's ultimately our responsibility to make sure that our customers get the notifications. That takes a lot of time. When we have people that aren't getting notified or didn't get the right notification, that we got to go back and look and see what broke down, figure that out. And a lot of times that we're dealing with right now is some of the new services that we're fixing with the new notifications is drafting our own notifications, identifying who to contact, and that all takes time from the engineers to do that. So we get, hey, why didn't I get this notification? Well, typically people, when they onboard, we add them to the entities and they get notifications, and that relatively doesn't change unless they contact us and say who needs to get notified. People change over time, email lists change, and so with the self-service notification, people can go in there and select what they want to view. And I'll say one other element that we have is people, instead of trying to figure out what they wanted before because they couldn't just see in there and pick, they'd say, well, I want to be on the list that gets all the notifications. But then they get all the notifications from our network and have a hard time identifying what actually impacts them, which is the same really as not getting notifications, because it generates a lot of feedback to us. Hey, does this actually impact me? Like, we should focus on getting you more targeted notifications. So with the self-service one, we think that'll help. And in doing that in the blocks, what we're actually finding is, in NOAA, we have FSMA IDs per customer. Each customer has a different FSMA ID. And because we're using that, which is something that I think they're going to talk about in a little bit, our customer dashboards and other tools that we're utilizing, we're able to get efficiencies there because we can say, you know what, everything associated with this FSMA ID, throw in a dashboard that shows all the bandwidth graphs, their tickets, their usage, and that creates automatically versus how we were kind of doing that customer by customer and having to manually add and remove stuff from that. And that becomes more dynamic, and our customers use that, which then lessens kind of the amount they have to directly contact us about issues. They can look, they can self-assess some stuff, they can look at their bandwidth or issues over time, they can see similarities in their graph. So that's a great tool for them, and that'll have just their connections in it. So kind of long story long, the notification tool has helped us optimize in a lot of different areas, and we're excited about rolling that out. It's been a long process because with notifications, you identify things, and as we're going through, and it's like, well, what about this? We have to solve that, and that's been good because it also helps us reimagine and re-identify the things that are important. So when we're going through and we're like, well, do we need this? And we got to look at, is that something that we think is valid? So some parts we've been able to scale back, and other parts we're scaling deeper. So it's been eye-opening and learning, and still to this day we're working on it. Even and to the point about the data in the database, that's one thing that we've found as we not really change direction, but as we continue to mature, we want to use the data a little differently. And so right now with this, for instance, we're going to have to change a lot of data, and we had to clean up data that we had that kind of is going to be a little bit different structured, which definitely takes time. So it's important to kind of lay that out and think in the context of what you want to use and how you want to use things together, because it helps with the data entry. But I guess I'll kind of leave it there unless there was other points you wanted me to hit on.
I think that drove home what we were talking about early on, and that really solidifies the benefits that I think that networks could see in the future as we begin to expand this and even implement it on NOAA. Are there any other questions or comments, or from other networks? Lonnie mentioned some of their struggles potentially, and especially with the pending upgrade. Do you do it now or do it after the upgrade? Are there others that maybe want to talk a little bit about where they're at with notifications and what they might see in the future? What struggles they're seeing?
I will say that during this NOAA notification project, one of the things that we definitely identified early on was the need to very clearly identify what services you want to notify about, and then how those services map to your infrastructure. How you identify when one instance of those services are out or will be out during a planned change, and then who needs to know about that service. And so it really helped. I think helped us think about those things in terms of, let's just take this one service at a time. Let's think about how we handle this for our wireless service. Let's think about how we handle this for our LAN service, and break it up into chunks that were manageable, and really, help us be able to get that documentation for each service in place in a way that I think will be robust. And like Adam said, we'll be able to flow into other tools in the future as well.
So I don't, this may sound like a really naive question, but because I seem to recall there was a user group, a GlobalNOC user group spun up at one point to look at notifications. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's sort of the output of that is sort of what we use for the process reengineering for notifications work that we did last year. That group sort of became dormant after that, and that's probably one of the things we may want to look at as we reinvigorate the users group is notifications, and that focus group is something we want to try and revive.
Okay, and that's where I was going. I've committed to several people in the community that we would have some community conversations, at least on the Internet 2 side, and it would be a real shame to do that in a vacuum. So if there's some other clients that are interested in being part of that conversation, I would love for it to be bigger.
And that's one of the things we're trying to do out of this meeting is gather those topics that people might be interested in follow-up users group sessions. This could definitely be one of them.
Yeah, I would put a heavy plus mark on notifications for us.
I think I didn't raise my hand, and I'm not being polite. So I think at the highest level, so if you take the difference between maybe how NOAA runs, their operation and encapsulates how they want NWave to run, it might be very different. I think that was said by somebody else, how a REN might, run ours. And Ocean always runs into the, well, do we notify, the higher eds when the K-12s are affected by some, firewall context and things like that. And so you have that partition that you want to understand at a technical level. And I'm also very cognizant to want to be maybe not automated in certain aspects of the notification process that I want to have input into, or I want, Tim, my CTO, to have input into as to whether or not we actually are notifying or not notifying, right? And so I think there is some very gray custom area on probably each entity's behalf that says we've got to be careful. I know we haven't even solved some sort of unified message for how they get notified, whether it's via text or via email, or via phone, right, and who gets notified. I've had customers get mad that they get notified too often, and I'm like, well, just ignore it. But it's like, so there is some like I said, really customized want on my part, at least at the higher level, for having us make certain decisions about how notifications go out and even what they say.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I think, important to have flexibility for when you send a notification out and when you don't. I think the real difference in this system is that we're basically saying the users get to select what they get notified about and what they don't. And that may not be something that every network wants, but that's sort of the direction we're going with NWave.
Yeah. You do run into the process. This is really shows itself in the cybersecurity threat feed stuff, right? So, I'm getting stuff from RenISAC and everybody in the world all day long, right? And then what do you pay attention to, and what don't you pay attention to? I think we run the same thing on the network side.
I think the point that you're making about having a certain amount of human control is a really astute one, and that's something that we're going to be figuring out. As it is today, we've been building this service-based notification model, but there is still, these messages aren't just going out completely automatically. So there's still space in there, like for human element, and sort of like higher level policy-based workflow decisions to be made. So you can. There's a space in there, let's say, if you want some kind of approval for certain classes of notifications. The subscription model is people are choosing what notifications they get, but it's still up to you as the customer what notifications get sent.
Right. And we will extend this out, maybe we'll talk a little bit later or offline about we're actually going to the next level of CRM here, right? So a customer relationship piece, right? So now I sit there and say, well, what becomes the source of truth for my members? Like, do all my members live within, say, ServiceNow as a source of truth and then populate my CRM? And then if I do that, what fields do I want to flag or not flag relative to notifications, right? That becomes an interesting architectural question when you're thinking about integration of the service, because half my organization lives in ServiceNow with you guys, right? Well, half my organization doesn't. And sometimes the people that I want massaging the notification side of things might be in member services who doesn't live in ServiceNow, right? And so the question then, how do you amalgamate those environments and make them work at a business flow and a workflow issue through the company?
You're getting a little ahead of yourself there. That is the next session.
Is it really? Oh, I'm sorry. I did, Corey. I should have studied the agenda and kept my mouth shut, but I didn't.
But that was a lovely teaser.
That's all
lovely. It's completely fine because we just added you to the panel for that session. So.
Yeah, that's some of the stuff we'll talk about in the next session. But you've got a good point there. What is, like my team as well, like we don't use ServiceNow in the same capacity. So how do you get your business side and your technical side to not have to either duplicate information or, don't have conflicting sets of data? We're also at time for this session. So if there are any more notification questions, you can add them either into the chat or onto Slack, and we can answer them as we have time. We can bring them up maybe later in the closing or in the open mic stuff later. So I'll guess now we'll take a break and come back around 12:55. So I guess I'll see you all then. Thanks again for all the session. Thanks everybody. Sorry for those that had trouble getting in. Looks like we got it all figured out though. And thanks Ian for presenting.